Today we'll be swapping out the brake pads, the rotor, and the wheel bearings on my 1991 Trans Am. This procedure is going to be the same for a lot of these older GM models. And this is what it'll look like when we're all done. Let's get started. First, you're going to need your Allen key. We're going to pop out the two bolts that are holding on your caliper. Set these aside. Your caliper should just come right off, but if it doesn't, you could use a screwdriver or a crowbar or something to pry it off. Mine just popped right off. So, somebody not too long ago must have done a brake job on this car, because you can see my brake pads are pretty new. But what I noticed is, and it may be tough to capture this in the camera, there's a really deep groove going around my rotor. And if you run your finger up and down the rotor like this, you can tell there's a few other grooves. This one right here, you can probably see it, is the worst. I'm getting some vibration when I brake the car. When you move your caliper aside, try to hang it on the control arm. You don't want it to dangle by the brake cable. Alright, next up, grab a screwdriver and a hammer. And we're going to knock this dust cover off. And set this aside, unless of course you've purchased a new one, then you no longer need it. Next up is our cotter pin and castle nut. You pull the cotter pin off with some needle nose pliers. And with a wrench, you should be able to get the castle nut off pretty easily. Set that aside as well, unless of course you purchased a new one. Now the rotor is going to pop off. But as you pop off, pay attention here. It's easy for this wheel bearing to just fall down, and that's fine, but we want to keep this shield that's holding it in. It's kind of like a nut. You'll see as I get this off here. Also, when you're pulling it off, be careful not to let it hit the spindle. You don't want to do any damage to your spindle down here. Alright, so here's what I was talking about. You pull this off. You want to keep this, so set this aside. And then here's your outer wheel bearing. This seems to actually be in good condition. But we're here, we're swapping it out, so let's do it. Alright, this is the fun part. You're going to want some rubber gloves for this. And here's why. Here is our new inner wheel bearing. This needs to be packed with grease. This gooey, delicious stuff right here. So, what you do is basically put some on the palm of your hand here. And what I like to do to get started is basically put some grease on the tips of my fingers and work it in. Press down into the bearing and go all the way down, repeating that. Just kind of push in, push in. Alright, then put a little bit more on the palm of your hand. Now what you're going to do is kind of press the bearing against the palm of your hand again and just go all the way around. You literally want to pack as much grease into this bearing as you can get in there. Use as much as you need to get the job done. Alright, check it out. This is one way to tell that you're pretty much done packing it. You see this seal that goes along here? It's maybe tough to tell on the camera, but if you press the grease in, you should see it come out the top. See that? You can see it a little bit in the camera. If it comes, actually that was pretty good. Go all the way around like that, and you can see it comes out the top. That's a good indication that you've packed it enough. This is pretty good. This is ready to be installed. Alright, here's the brand new rotor. We just packed our inner bearing. Our inner bearing is going to go on the back side. And installing the bearing is as simple as just, notice it's kind of cone shaped. The smaller side is going to drop right in. Now of course we're going to need something to hold that in, and that's what this seal is for. And we're going to need to install this seal like so. What we can do is apply just a little bit of grease along the outside. Now, what I'm about to do is somewhat unorthodox. They do sell kits that are basically metal cylinders that will fit right over the seal. You can pound it down with a hammer and you'll be good to go. I've done this a whole bunch of times. I no longer rent that kit. You can rent them for free basically from like anywhere. AutoZone, O'Reilly's, Advance, they all have them. But at least on this car, I've found that a can is the exact, a can of spray paint is the exact same size. And I literally just bang the top of the can and go all the way around until the seal is seated. We can flip the rotor around. Now we've got to pack the outer wheel bearing just like we packed the inner bearing. I'm not going to show you how to do that again because we just went through it. So I'm going to get that done on my end and we'll come right back when I'm done packing. My outer wheel bearing is packed. Drop it right in. But the difference now is we don't have a seal to install on this side. That's where this washer comes in that we pulled off earlier. Notice this divot. When we reinstall the rotor, this divot will line up with the spindle, so this is actually going to be installed like this. And that's going to hold the outer wheel bearing in. Before we install the rotor, I'm just going to clean this off of all the old grease and apply just a little bit of fresh grease all the way around. Let's get this rotor installed. Again, be mindful of the spindle. In you go. Here's our washer. Reinstall the castle nut. A good indication to know how tight to put the castle nut is basically just as it stops moving. If you pull back and forth from the top, you should have absolutely no play and it should still be able to spin. You may have to play with this a little bit just to get it just right. I think that's it for me. Reinstall the cotter pin. dust cover. Next up, we're going to be reinstalling the caliper with the new brake pads. But before we can do that, because we are installing new brake pads that are a little bit thicker, we need to retract the piston in the caliper. The easiest way to do that is to grab one of your old brake pads, place it over the piston. Now use your C-clamp, fit it around, tighten it up. Oh, I should mention one other thing I have already done off camera. I popped the lid off of my brake fluid reservoir at the master cylinder. That's going to make this a little bit easier to press down. Having said that, we're going to tighten the C-clamp now. Keep your eye on that reservoir. If you go too quick or if you press too hard, there's a good chance some of that brake fluid could pop out the top. So as I tighten this down, the piston will retract. I'm going to keep my eye on the reservoir. And there we go, it's all the way in. Now you can install your new brake pads. And if you're doing this on the 3rd gen like me, it's pretty simple. The outer pad has this clip here. Just kind of fits right in these grooves. Like so. And then the inner pad has this clip here. That's actually going to fit right inside the piston on the caliper. Just like that. Now we're ready to put it back on. By the way, you may have noticed the caliper is now black. I cheated while we were off camera. I did spray it down with some caliper paint. So if you want to do that, now's the time to paint your calipers. Alright, that should slide right on there. Grab your bolts from earlier and reinstall. I'm going to grab some brake cleaner now and clean the rotor off. Got a little bit of grease around here. I'm going to come back with a torque wrench too. I didn't look up the specs on these and I can't find it right now. But you're going to want to check your manual and make sure you torque this down to the correct specifications. Anyway, I hope this helped you guys out. If you're doing this at home, let me know how it goes. If you liked the video, give me a like, give me a subscribe. I'd appreciate it. But that's it. I'll see you next time.